Hello fellow Fiberfae! Today is the 1-year anniversary of my first ever crochet pattern release, the Mallary Mesh Sleeves, and I wanted to celebrate by sharing the video tutorial with you today. For materials, we are going to need yarn. Caron Chunky Cakes in Rainbow Jellies is what I like to use. I get it from Michaels. Next, we are going to need an 8mm hook, a darning needle, stitch markers, scissors, and a measuring tape, which I forgot to put in the video, but that's okay. To start this project, we are going to make a slip knot. From here, crochet a foundation chain of 147 plus 3, or 150 total. If you are using a thinner yarn and hook, or have a longer arm span than most, go ahead and chain an amount equal to the measurement from one wrist across your chest all the way to the other wrist. Once you have finished chaining your required amount, go ahead and count 6 chains from your hook, and in the 6th chain from your hook, we are going to do a double crochet. To double crochet, yarn over, you're going to insert your hook into that 6th chain, yarn over, pull through. You're going to have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, and again, yarn over, pull through 2. Next, we are going to chain 1. We are going to skip the next chain space, and we are going to double crochet into the one after that. So again, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through. You should have 3 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 of those loops, yarn over, pull through 2 of those loops. And we are going to continue this pattern of doing a chain 1, skip a chain, and double crochet into the next chain, all the way across until you reach the opposite end of your chain. Once you've reached the end of this row and double crocheted into the final chain, go ahead and chain 3, which is going to count as a double crochet plus a chain 1 for your next row. You are going to skip that first chain 1 space, and you are going to double crochet into the next double crochet. And in doing so, you're going to create a square on top of the mesh square from before. Continue this pattern by chaining 1, skipping the chain 1 space, and double crocheting into the next double crochet all the way across until you reach the other side of this row again. Once you've reached the end of this row and have done your final double crochet stitch, you are going to go ahead and chain 3, which counts as a double crochet plus chain 1, turn your work, and you are going to do yet another mesh row all the way across. You are going to continue these mesh rows until you have enough to equal your required width. I gauge my required sleeve width by dividing my upper arm circumference by 2. So the largest part of my upper arm measures 10 inches. I divide that by 2 and I get 5. You can add extra rows for more width if you prefer a looser fitting sleeve. However, I do not recommend that you do less, otherwise your sleeves are going to be far too tight. Once you've reached your desired sleeve width, we are going to start another mesh row by chaining 3 and turning our work, and double crocheting into the next double crochet, skipping the chain 1 spaces, and we are going to continue this until we have 30 mesh squares total, or if you chained more in the beginning with your foundation chain, you're going to make enough squares to equal the measurement from your wrist all the way up to your shoulder. Once you have crocheted up to that point, or made 30 squares if you're following mine, I'll meet you there. I've crocheted my 30 mesh squares, and now I will be cutting my yarn to start on the other side of my neckline. However, if you are plus size and would like a wider neck opening, you can actually chain 3, turn your work, and do another mesh row so that your neckline opening is wider. Now, working from the opposite end of the sleeve, I'm going to count another 30 squares, or if you had to do more, the same amount that you did for your other side of the neckline opening. Once I am sure that I have an even amount of squares on both sides of the neckline, I'm going to go ahead and mark that with a stitch marker, and then I am going to reattach my yarn. And from there I am going to chain up 3, and then I'm going to skip the chain 1 space and double crochet in the next double crochet, and I'm just going to continue as if I was doing a regular mesh row all the way across. Once you have double crocheted in the final stitch, yet again we are going to chain 3, turn our work, and we are going to continue with another mesh row all the way back down until we reach the neckline opening from the previous row. Once I reach that neckline opening from the previous row, I'm going to count the amount of stitches that we originally skipped, so everything in between both sides of the neckline, and the amount that I count is going to be the amount of chains that I am going to do to be able to continue my row with an even amount on both sides. Once I verified the amount of stitches that I skipped and chained that same amount, I should have the same amount of chains up at the top of the neckline that we're making there as I do skipped stitches at the bottom. So that there and the bottom should have the same amount of stitches and chains. Now I'm going to continue this row and kind of finish and close that neckline by adding a double crochet into that first double crochet there. And then from there, after finishing the double crochet, I am going to chain 1, skip the chain 1 space, double crochet in the next double crochet, just like a regular mesh row, all the way down and across until I reach the other end of the sleeve. Once I have reached the end of this row and double crocheted in my final stitch, I am going to chain 3, turn my work, and do another mesh row all the way across, working straight along the chains of the finished neckline, just as we would a regular row. And I'm going to do the same amount of mesh rows again as I did for the previous half of my sleeve. So I initially did 5, so I'm going to do 5 more mesh rows for the other end of my sleeve. So I am back after having done another 5 mesh rows, so now I have an equal amount of rows on each side of my neckline. Now it's time to sew, so I am going to cut a long enough string to sew together the first sleeve. That way I don't have to reattach and waste, unnecessary extra thread. The less work, the better for me. Before we can start sewing, we're going to need to mark a couple points. Find the very center of your work, the very center stitch. I do this by finding the center mesh square of my neckline, and then I mark that. You'll want to do this on both sides of your top, and then you're going to fold it in half and pin it together, both of those center stitches. Next, you are going to measure your upper chest area. So this is going to be, if you raise up your arms, you're going to measure around your chest, right underneath around your armpits. And you are going to take this measurement and divide that by 2. So let's say your upper chest measurement is 40. You are going to end up with a number of 20. And now you're going to want to spread that 20 evenly across on both sides of the center stitch marker. So that's going to be 10 inches on each side. So I'll measure that on one side, and then I will mark how far away that is, and it needs to be on a double crochet. And from there, I'm going to count the amount of squares that 10 inches equals from the side to the center. And then I'm going to count that same amount of squares for the other side so that I have the proper equal amount that I need on both sides of the center. Once both sides of your sleeve have been equally measured and marked from that center stitch marker, flip your work and just repeat exactly what you did before on this side, counting that same amount of squares, and you are going to pin it to the other side that you had measured before. And what we are marking out here, not including the center stitch marker, but those 2 side stitch markers, is the bottom opening of our sleeves, and we already have the neckline that we made before. Once you've marked out the bottom opening of your sleeves, go ahead and start sewing your first sleeve together by threading the darning needle and working from one corner of your sleeve, sewing each chain 1 space and double crochet together until you reach the very first stitch marker that is closest to you. Once you hit the stitch marker closest to you, it should not be a center stitch marker, by the way. That was just there for reference to make sure everything was even. Go ahead and fasten your yarn, tie it off. Feel free to weave in the end. And we are going to sew together the opposite sleeve by starting at the opposite corner and again sewing to the nearest stitch mark. Once you've finished sewing both sleeves, please try it on and decide if you want to loosen up a square on each side or tighten up a square on each side before continuing. Once you've decided that your sleeves fit comfortably, reattach your yarn and you are going to put a single crochet stitch into each chain one space and double crochet all the way around, and do this with whatever side you want facing out, you know, the right side. And this is going to be a single crochet border. Once you've reached the end and single crocheted in the final stitch, go ahead and slip stitch into the very first single crochet of the border that we did, and now you can go ahead and cut off and fasten your yarn. And you are going to repeat this single crochet border all the way around the neckline and your sleeve openings as well. And once you have finished with your single crochet borders, all you have to do is weave in your ends and you are entirely done with this top. I personally like to weave my ends into the single crochet borders because I feel like they hide a lot better than just into the mesh, but that's just my personal preference. Feel free to go about it in whichever way makes you happy. Thank you so much for watching through this tutorial. I have been struggling with seizures and brain fog this week, so I don't know how clear everything was, but if you have questions, reach out in the comments or hit me up on social media. I love to hear from you, and all of my links are in the description below. Happy 1-year anniversary to me being a crochet pattern designer. I'm so grateful for this community, and I love you all very much.